You're watching Global Trade This Week with Pete Mento and Doug Draper.
Hey everybody, I'm Pete Mento, Trade Geek Podcast, and with me, as almost always, depending on whether or not one of us has been silly enough to actually decide to take a week off, is my good friend and life mate, Doug Draper. Doug, it's a real pleasure to have you back again for another week of the two of us talking about trade and me occasionally abusing Keenan, our producer. It's good to see you, Doug.
Yeah, it's good to see you as well. I don't know what to think about life partner or whatever you just said, so I'm just going to pretend I didn't hear that.
No, man. I can't smile without you. I can't laugh. I can't sing. I'm finding it hard to do anything.
Mm-hmm.
That's Barry Manilow for you, in case you didn't hear that part.
Yeah, I know
I'm not
Barry.
doing the show with anybody else. I don't care how many times Fox or the BBC calls me. It's just me and you, Doug. Okay?
Yeah.
This is who I do the show with, pal.
That's great. Well, it's Dickie's Barbecue is the key thing. Have they dropped any food off? That was
Dickie's Barbecue has not given us any money or commercial airtime yet, and I'm kind of annoyed with it. The least they could do is send us a sleeve of cups, man, because mine are starting to break. So it would be great if we could get some more Dickie's Barbecue cups. Yeah. But, this has been another great week in trade, another great week in logistics, another week of everybody pulling their hair out as the worst peak and the end of the pandemic, as the economics of the world begins to come hammering back. Doug, it seems that every morning we wake up with another bitter taste in our mouth, and I don't think this week was any more difficult or different from it for anybody.
Yeah.
When's it going to end, pal? When's it going to end?
I don't know. It's not anytime soon. I think one of the topics you have on the list is comical, to be honest with you.
It is, yeah. So that means I'm going first, right? I won the coin toss?
No, man, you're not following the thing. You start, you do the intro, I go first, then you, then me, then you, then I outro.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. So, in other words, you're going to take the first topic this week.
That's correct. Yep.
Wow. All right,
good.
Then. You go ahead and take the first topic.
All right. Well, this one, Pete, is super important. So it's really about transportation assets are going to be a hindrance to the economic flow of commerce in a time of the year with accelerated supply chain activity. So all that is a bunch of crap, Pete. That's the nerd. No. That whole statement, that's nerd talk, all right? What this basically means is that the shit's going to get real this fall with the lack of equipment will be a serious contributor to that. Equipment, ocean containers, trucks, chassis, or whatever, none of that stuff was able to get reset, quote unquote, in the last 6 months. Everything will be over by end of summer. Things will get reset. Man, it's about to turn into hyper gear, and none of those assets are repositioned in any of the places where they need to be. And to get them back to the point of origin where stuff is getting manufactured, every day there's new lockdowns. There's ports, COVID-related lockdowns because of outbreaks. I think literally just this morning they talked about the Shanghai airport, and the cargo side is in a lockdown quarantine. So you have all these, let's take ocean containers for first of all. They're all over in the consumer side of the house. Everybody wants to get them back to the production side of the country, of the world, but they can't right now because of the COVID. They can, but they're going to sit around and move slower. And so it's just going to be a mess. There's too many of them here on this side of the pond. You can't get them over to the other side of the pond quickly. The benefit that I think you'll see is exporters, right? So being in Colorado, if there's a container sitting in LA, it's unloaded, and we got to get it the hell back over to Asia to fill it back up. Can't do it as fast as you did just a couple of months ago. So I think that we spoke about before where the exporters, including farmers and the harvest season coming up, I think there's going to be a little bit of relief because if it's delayed to get back to Asia, well, let's spend an extra week and throw some stuff on it to get some revenue and move it back. So when I said farmers were going to be impacted because of container shortages, I think there's a little bit of relief in the sense that there is congestion and COVID lockdowns at ports of origin. The other piece of it being here on the domestic side in warehousing, there is not enough trailers around to move things. There are not enough chassis. Those are repositioned. So we've talked about connectors in ports and sort centers. So this would be a variation of the connectors, but equipment is going to be out of whack, and that's going to be a big contributor. So you will see articles about why can't they just make more ocean containers? Where are they? Why can't they get repositioned? That's going to be a topic this fall whenever the gas gets turned on, because we ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah, we have not seen anything yet. And I love how you can casually surf the web right now on news about international trade and logistics. And the sky is falling, cancel Christmas. It's all. But then you start to read the sort of things like you just said, where hey, everybody calm down. It's all going to be fine. Everything's going to be fine. It's the earth is healing. It's all going to be just fine. No, the repositioning of containers and chassis and the ability for importers and exporters to manage that has always been, it's a time-tested frustration that we have been trying to overcome since I've been in this business. Since I was working on vessels, it's been a real problem, as well as the upkeep and finding parts to keep these things up. It's been a problem. We've never managed this issue well. Not only that, we've never brought technology to bear to this to a reasonable extent that we've been able to manage it well. Add to that nearly all of that equipment that you're talking about is manufactured in one place, China. And that place right now is dealing with its own problems, raw materials, production, and export shortages. This is not going to get dealt with anytime soon. And here's a wrinkle I think we should consider, Doug. What happens when all this new stuff goes into the supply chain? What's going to happen with the old stuff? You and I both know what's going to happen. People are going to get it out of the market as fast as they can to either recycle it, repair it, or put it into a secondary market for sale, to work as storage, to do whatever they can, because they don't want the value of their new containers to go down. So there's going to be a supply and demand curve here where they're going to do whatever they can to make sure that their new assets don't lose value, which they just paid a lot of money for by taking as much of their old assets out of the market to maintain that dominance financially. Don't think this is going to change anytime soon. If you do, you haven't been following this absolutely savage type of business that we've been involved in for a very, very long time.
Yeah, good points. Good points. All right, man. Point one. What do you got?
Yeah. So the World Trade Organization, they really are so insightful and wise, aren't they? They gave us a lovely little report yesterday that said, everybody be cool. We've peaked. The madness, the consumption model, all of this desire to buy everything that we can possibly find. We've hit the peak. Everything's going to be downhill from here on out. Everybody be cool. And I'll admit, okay, when I read this, it was my weigh-in day. So, I weigh in once a week at the Pete Doesn't Want to Be Fat Anymore clinic. And I don't eat dinner the night before because it's like a wrestling meet. I want to go in there, my thing. So I might have been hallucinating from a lack of eating when I read this, but I was screaming and yelling and having an argument with the chair boards of the World Trade Organization. My highlighter was whizzing through it. I was so angry. I think my neighbors were going to come and knock on the door to tell me to calm down. It was like I was having a fever dream. I couldn't believe that you would go so far as to say these sorts of things. It is absurd to think that the worst is over. We haven't even gotten to the worst. The global economy is fighting a war on one front, and that's the resurgence of the American economy. The rest of the world has not returned to its economic consumption-driven madness yet. And we're not showing any signs of slowing. And with the Delta variant and all this wackiness that's going on with our attitudes about COVID, we're probably going to have more lockdowns, which means that return is being pushed farther and farther away. There's going to come a time when our economy is kicking on all 8 cylinders again, and then Europe's is coming back, Japan's is coming back, Singapore, Australia, South America, Canada. Then what are you going to do, WTO, other than apologize for being super wrong? And that's my first. It's not very often that I take on an entire world organization, but I'm doing it today. And if they want to get in the cage and lock it behind them, I'll go all 5 rounds.
Nice. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves.
There's a movie for Keenan to watch. I bet he'd love it too.
Yeah. No, I think gosh, every week we could have this topic of somebody. I don't know if it's political. I'm not a very political guy, but how anybody could make that comment is beyond me. We spoke about the Roaring '20s. It's not over. And I think the other piece is that the fundamental buying habits of consumers nowadays, there's a paradigm shift. It's not like, hey, here's 3 months in the summer, let's buy a bunch of stuff. People have decided they want to work from home full time. People have decided they want to buy their groceries online all the time. People want to buy more stuff online. And, the acceleration of COVID and all that stuff that's, old hat. But it's a paradigm shift. It's not like we're going back to the way we used to procure and buy products, right? And so there's so many things about this that's just strikingly wrong that I don't know. Maybe we don't know what we're talking about. We have a pretty good track record, but anyway, I'm in 100% agreement, man.
Yeah,
That's an article that's months or years premature.
There was I won't say the name of this particular journal, but one of the media outlets, a printed outlet said this kind of disinformation is what gets people in trouble, because folks that are not that tied in on logistics, and a lot of companies still aren't, we visit them all the time. We talk to them all the time. They should be more in tune to what's going on. This kind of disinformation, it's not disinformation, it's a lie. Can we please stop calling things that are wrong and things that are lies disinformation? They're lies. It's wrong and it's lies. Disinformation is a pretty word for being wrong. So let's just call it what it is. It's wrong. And take ownership of that, and understand that when the World Trade Organization says things like that, there are people who do listen, who are not as well informed as they should be, because they're not on the ground dealing with it every day. And it's probably going to cost people jobs. It's going to cost people opportunities with consumers, because they're going to prepare based on bad information, which means lies. So it's unfortunate that they're going to put people in that situation.
Yeah.
But anyway, that brings us to halftime at the Cap Logistics Global Trade This Week show. And I know, Doug, you are fired up. So what do we have this week for halftime?
Well, I'm there's 2 things, Pete, and one of them I know you're gonna love. Bitcoin all-time high. It's up 73% for the year, and it's over 50K as of yesterday or Friday. So the Bitcoin is back, baby. Don't shake it down. And I think the $500 of Bitcoin I bought is now worth like $505. So it's nowhere but up.
I don't care. Doug, I feel like you're baiting me with this. You're just trying to see if you can get me to have a stroke live on TV, and it's just not going to happen, pal. I don't.
All right.
I don't care. I don't care. Bitcoin is stupid. It's always going to be stupid, and I'll be dead before it becomes a common currency. And I can hear Keenan's eyes rolling right now in the booth, and I don't care, Keenan. I don't care. All right, what's your other halftime point?
Yeah, the other halftime. This one is probably the most important topic of the entire day. Is that tomorrow, Pete? Pumpkin spice lattes drop at Starbucks. I don't know if it's the unofficial start of the fall season, the holiday season, but PSL is back. It's going to come with a vengeance. I'm just hoping that there's no delays on pumpkin spice or milk, because that's going to be catastrophic to millions and millions of people across America.
Okay, so you again did this on purpose. I can't stand pumpkin spice. I think it's I categorically reject the concept of pumpkin spice. I drink coffee. I drink a lot of it, as you know. I drink too much of it, to be fair. I make my own cold brew. When I don't drink the stuff I make, I buy it from, I'm agnostic, right? I'll buy it from Starbucks. I'll buy it from wherever, Dunkin' Donuts. I don't really care. I'm not a snob. But this idea of pumpkin spice, first of all, pumpkin is not a food. Okay, it's a decoration. It's something you eat when you have to. All right, that's what it is. It is a member of the squash family, and in the great words of George Carlin, you shouldn't eat something that sounds like a verb. I'm going to squash something. No, I'm just not going to do it. Second of all, the religion that has erupted around this concept of pumpkin spice, we need to declare a war on it. There's no other way to describe my distaste for this concept. My father was a spice importer. The spices that go into pumpkin spice could not be more common or simple. And for those of you who are obsessed with pumpkin spice, I'll let you draw your own conclusion about what I think about that obsession. I know I'm in the minority, and I understand that. I don't always take popular opinions. It is extremely popular. Everyone gets fired up for it every time of year. It's like people who don't like barbecue. I love it. Love it. Had it for lunch today. I can't get enough of it. I think it's one of God's perfect foods. But pumpkin spice, you can take your pumpkin spice and go buy it with your Bitcoin and go off to Never Call Me Again Island because I need to hear about it. I absolutely can't stand it. And with that, that's the end of halftime from our good friends at Cap Logistics. Learn more about them at caplogistics.com.
Nice. Good segue, man. Good segue.
Yeah.
So my second topic, it's almost kind of holiday-esque. And I think that the headline that people are going to see called Emergency Declaration related to rules around supply chain and the transport of products is going to be as common as Happy Holidays in Q3 and 4. And I spoke about this before, but hey, this isn't working out, so we're going to put a temporary exemption into this rule that we set up in the past that was super important that we need to follow. But yeah, now it's no longer convenient, so don't worry about following it. I know that there's a huge problem with the driver shortage, and I guarantee there's going to be folks, I think Werner Trucking has already come out with this to say, listen, these guys know how to drive as far as a commercial driver's license. They've done all the due diligence. They know the skills needed, but the waiting period and the process it has to go through from getting a driver who's already knowledgeable on the road, providing value and moving our products across the country. But my whole point is that there's going to be more emergency declarations to waive rules that are perceived to be very important is going to continue to grow. Air freight's going to be next. I think over-the-road drivers in America are going to be next. And Pete, I'm going to pull the pin on this one, and I'm going to throw it out over to you on the grenade. Do you think that they would increase the $800 de minimis for fourth quarter just to keep things moving?
I do. I think that's something that they could absolutely could do. The problem they have is that customs system wouldn't be able to keep up with it. It's at a point right now, buddy, where ACE, the Automated Commercial Environment, which is customs operating system, breaks pretty much every time these massive transfers of data go through them. They're just not, they didn't see it coming and being adopted as widespread as it has been, and they're just not technically able to keep up with the data demand. And they're reaching out to the trade to try to find a way to deal with that issue. So there's a longing, there's a desire between CBP and the trade to come up with a better way of doing this. I'm not sure if there'll be enough time to come up with it prior to Christmas.
Yeah.
That'd be an excellent way to manage it. I'm just not sure how they're going to be able to do it from a technical aspect. Now, your topic brings up an interesting point from a policy standpoint. Doug, I'm a rule follower, big believer in rules. I work in compliance. Going back to our first show, right? What was your line? Sometimes it's better to beg for forgiveness than ask permission, right?
Yeah.
There comes a point, though, when you look at a policy, every law, in my opinion, should be reviewed when it becomes clear that we are on a regular basis suspending parts of it. We're making a conscious decision to go around it, to lessen its effects, to decide not to enforce it because it's in the greater good. And this seems to happen a lot with regards to the things that you just talked about driver safety, about rest, about issues with pilots and such. We keep bumping up against this. It seems like even in the 10 months we've been doing this, we've talked about letting drivers have more hours, about letting pilots have more hours, about times when things can be driven versus this or that because of emergency situations. If we keep doing this all the time and creating suspensions, maybe we need to change the regulation where there's a subpart where we can do it under certain conditions and we make it part of the actual regulation. Or maybe we need to soften these regulations because we've seen an area that there isn't a good fit, that maybe they are a bit too strict in certain places, and there should be some kind of a dispensation made for particular types of situations. When something becomes dogmatic rather than pragmatic, so when we're looking at a regulation and we're just putting our foot down and saying, because this is how it needs to be, and we're just being stubborn being stubborn for stubbornness sake just ruins things. It's not about enforcement anymore. That really becomes tyranny. And I know you hear that, and it sounds like tyranny is a word that political scientists use a little too much, but in the context that I'm using it, it feels oppressive, particularly when you're trying to make money as a business. So this is something where trucking associations, certainly, groups like IATA FIATA, AEI, and CBFFA, they might want to get together and maybe work as a combined group to go to people that do legislation and see what they can do as an organized group to try to get some relief on this. Because I agree with you, Doug, this isn't going to get any easier. We're going to keep bumping up against this as we struggle through this pandemic, as we recover out of that pandemic, and as economies reemerge. And in order to do the right thing, we might want to take a different approach at the way that we deal with these regulations, being more pragmatic than dogmatic.
Yeah, I like it. I never thought I'd hear the word tyranny and some other word that you gave around a global trade and transportation podcast. But hey, if it fits, the shoe fits, man. I think we're on a page here. You nailed it. If we keep going around the rules need to be reviewed.
Yeah. Yeah, if enough people are breaking the rule, we have to ask if that rule is actually just, and if it's in the best interest of both the people who are being governed by it and the people it's supposed to be protecting. And I think we're probably at that point with some of these questions.
Yeah. Well, before we go into your final one, the one guy that I know that always asks for forgiveness, not permission, is the guy right there, Troy. He just plays by his own rules.
I'm convinced that Troy was given to you by your Soviet spy master handler, and this is how you send secret signals to your people in Moscow.
His hair will be looking the other direction next week, and then I'll tell you what that means. But let's finish this bad boy up this week.
Let's bring it home.
Bring it home. It's you. You bring it home.
Yeah, the fourth topic this week is one that I've kind of made a name for myself taking unpopular opinions. And a few weeks ago, I really went out on a limb and I made the claim that I don't believe that inflation is going to have as brutal an effect as people believe it will on the course of the recovering American economy. There's a couple of reasons for this. I've talked about in the past. Wages have not increased on all of the differing areas of the pay scale, along with the desire to hire. So we're looking for people everywhere, but you'll note that wages have not increased with that desire. Also, people who are working have not seen significant wage increases. Have we seen increases in the cost of things? Yes, but that feels more like a supply and demand issue than one of necessarily just inflation. There's a lot of other reasons as well that I won't go into, because this is not me back at Harvard teaching economics 101. This is me on the Global Trade This Week television show. But one thing that did get my attention this week, for those of you who don't totally nerd out with the concept of Treasury inflationary protected securities, I just call them TIPS. It's one of those acronyms that I have to look at because I never remember what they actually account for. But TIPS and gold are two things that people generally buy as a hedge against inflation. And TIPS are bought directly from the Treasury. And for those of you who are looking for a hedge against inflation, it's something many people buy, where at a period years down the road, they will pay you a base payment outcome that is not based on the current rate of inflation at the time that it's paid, but one that is an increased amount based on the amount of inflation at the time that the payout happens. So in other words, the amount that's paid is based on the current rate of the CPI and inflation. So if inflation goes wacko, you end up getting paid more money, and you don't have to worry about that payment based off of inflation. The folks at BlackRock made a lot of money on these over the course of the past 2 years. But what's curious is these wizards have now started to suddenly short the TIPS market by big money. So what they're seeming to think is in the course of the next year to year and a half, that these types of assets will actually be undervalued because they're seeing that inflation will not be playing as key a role in the US economy and in the global economy as people had probably thought, that there has to be an end to this climbing concept of inflation in the American marketplace. And I think that that's an interesting indicator, particularly given the amount that they're buying. Do I think that we're going to see things get more expensive? Of course, but I believe that's more a function of a lack of ability to obtain it than more to do with the more traditional problems that are caused by inflation. or that cause inflation that many people believe are happening today, including concepts like the quantitative maneuverings that are being done, playing around with interest rates and such. I think that is, more to do with the transitory, non-transitory issues that we talk about with inflation. People realize. What does this have to do with trade? I think that the U.S. dollar will eventually calm down, and I think that when it does, this country is going to find itself in a very enviable position to have weathered through most of the inflationary issues we thought that they would have to, right as the rest of the world begins to deal with some very real inflation, because they've had to drag on the recovery out of COVID longer than we did. And that'll be a weird and interesting and wonderful place for this economy to be in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Pete, I am by no stretch an economist, and when we share our topics back and forth, this is one that I was like, all right, I got to get my my ducks in a row to have any feedback on that. And my feedback really was about the supply and the demand, meaning that people want what they want, and they're going to pay for whatever it costs. If my Peloton bike costs an extra $200, so be it. I'm already spending $2,000. If my PSL costs an extra 25 cents, so be it. I want it. So I think the consumption is going to continue to grow, and then this whole premise of this show is about supply chain disruption in the global trade. So I think to call your shot like midway through the game, to really dumb it down seems a little premature, because like we talk about over and over again, the things that have created the perceived or real inflation are nowhere near over. And so to say, hey, in 6 months, 12 months, everything will be back to normal, I think is premature. But I don't know the bells and the whistles and the ins and the outs like you do. But that's my take, is people are going to pay more money for the stuff they want. And I think it's premature to call your shot when we're nowhere near the end of this craziness.
Doug, to be fair, other people who are just as into this stuff as I am disagree with me completely. So it's not, and the vast majority of them disagree with me. So it's a very unpopular position I've taken, but I'm looking at all the information available to me, and I just can't agree with them. I think that there's a mass hysteria of trying to look for some sort of normalcy, saying, all the data's there pointing in one direction. This is how it always happens. We're not in an economy where things are happening how they always happen. And I think this is going to be an instance where the outcome is surprising. So I hope I'm wrong, because believe it or not, if I'm wrong, it's actually better for the global economy in the long run. But we'll see. And, like I tell everybody, when I was a little kid growing up in hot and awful Texas, the Dr. Pepper used to cost me a dime. And then out of nowhere, suddenly it was a quarter. And now if I want to buy Dr. Pepper, I'm spending $2 for it. And, that was a span of about 40 years. It doesn't take a whole lot of time for consumables to go from not being worth much to a whole bunch. And if you want an even crazier example, I was drinking water out of the garden hose, and now I'm buying it in bottles at gas stations. So something can change very quickly to change the attitude about what something is worth out of nowhere. And a great example of that is container rates.
Yeah.
But these are always transitory. We should always keep that in mind.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to bring it all back home, Pete. And I think with that comment, we are officially done with this week's episode. You and I couldn't pontificate back and forth or have our own opinions, right, wrong, or indifferent, without Cap Logistics and Keenan. He's in the box, pushing buttons, making us sound and look great. So if you want to get more information on what Cap Logistics does, please reach out at caplogistics.com. But I think that's it. So we'll be around next week. Can't thank everybody enough. And if you're a pumpkin PSL, I guess that's the term to use, thumbs up or thumbs down on the comments when you see the show, and we'll rock and roll. So until next week, Pete, take care, my friend.
Thanks, Doug. And I hope all of you find some type of coffee that you can drink without my mockery. See you all next week.
All right,
Peace.
take care.